Hey everybody, welcome into the Alabama postgame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Ben Flanagan this afternoon. Things just went final at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans as Alabama rolls over Kansas State 45-20. Your final score. Ben, Alabama Big Sugar Bowl win. Let's get your initial thoughts and reaction.
Yeah, I mean, Happy New Year to you, Simone, and everybody watching. And I know it's a Happy New Year for Alabama fans, or a late Christmas present anyway. What an awesome way to end the 2022 season, putting a cap on what many felt like was a disappointing year. But this win marked an insane number for Alabama, their 12th straight 11-win season. Off the bat, can we just acknowledge how stupid that is and how just incredibly fortunate this fan base is to witness this golden age of Alabama football? I mean, I kind of wish I was in New Orleans right now, to be honest with you, for the football and the beignets.
No doubt about it, and the fun on Bourbon Street. Guys, Kansas State is not some chump school. I mean, this is a team that has 10 wins that just won a Big 12 title over a team that's now in the playoffs. I think that, a lot of Am fans, okay, obviously there's disappointment being in the Sugar Bowl and not in the playoff this year, but Ben, you made such a great point, and this was such a positive ending to a season that at moments was not the perfection that we have seen year in and year out over such a long time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at the big picture in terms of like what this win does for Alabama historically, right? In terms of like how many straight 11-win seasons, how many straight 10-win seasons they've had. And that's just under Nick Saban. I mean, in this program's insane history, that's now 36 10-win seasons, I believe. I think it's 26 11-win seasons. Again, just ridiculous, just stupid. And that's like life is good in Tuscaloosa. That's all I'll say. Like before this year, that total I think was only equaled by Florida State, and with today's win, Alabama holds the record on their own. I believe that's true. And Alabama has 46 bowl wins to their name, and that's the most in college football history. It was the most entering the day, and so they just build on that record. And look, they didn't make the college football playoff. That's true, but they made the most of this postseason opportunity, and I think it sets a great tone for off-season expectations for next year.
Yeah, it really does. One thing in pregame, Ben, was when Nick Saban was speaking with the ESPN reporter, he said that these 11 o'clock kickoffs are challenging because you got to wake up, you got to eat breakfast, get something in you, get practice going. I played college basketball. I remember these early tips. It was like not something you wanted to do. And I think that showed a little bit there early on. It took a minute for these guys to really get going, but then once they did get going, it was just there was no stopping this offense or defense for that matter.
Yeah, can I give you a controversial take?
Sure.
I love 11 a.m. kickoffs personally, and
that's
as somebody,
you're like on your own on that one. Yes.
Well, I think people in sports media might feel that way, maybe not, because I mean, like you've got your whole day ahead of you when the game is over, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do with like the day now that this game is over, right? But you're right though. Like with more than a month to prepare for this game, Alabama's offense, they opened things up with a kind of sloppy 3 and out. And if you're scrolling Twitter during that, you saw fans pretty worried right away, like rumblings of this might be more of the same from Bill O'Brien's inconsistent offense this year, how Bryce Young's instinct and poise to make something happen after things break down. That was essentially the 2022 offense. And we saw some of that today too. But when Kansas State jumped out to that 10-0 run, after Deuce Vaughn's incredible 88-yard touchdown, you started getting whiffs of that nasty sugar, right? That Sugar Bowl of 2008, the sugar from 2013, 2014. But look, I mean, we've said it all year here, Simone. Like when you have the best player in college football on your team, you always have a shot. And that was more than true for Alabama today. They really could have checked out mentally. They could have gone through the motions, but they showed up and showed out. And it really starts and stops with Bryce Young. But the defensive unit, like you just said, they deserve a lot of credit. And I thought maybe the turning point in the game was when Kansas State went on that 18-play, 10.5-minute drive that resulted in 0 points after they got stopped on 4th down. I mean, Bama gets the ball. They score a touchdown to end the half. They get the ball back when the second half starts. They score another touchdown. They go on I think 5 straight possessions where they score a touchdown. It was just a huge swing in points and momentum.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Bryce Young and what he was able to do. We'll get to the defense in a moment. All the credit to the defense, absolutely, for weathering that storm. Bryce Young is unbelievable. That's no secret. I want to talk about one play specifically, and that's that touchdown pass that he threw as the opening second half in the third quarter there. That pass, I think it was Ja'Cory Brooks. Ben, that is like a multi-million-dollar pass that only few people can make. And I'm sure we're going to get to it in a moment in the highlights. Obviously, he had 5 on the day, but this guy is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a masterpiece of a throw. It was a masterpiece of a game for Bryce Young and what was really his curtain call as the Alabama starting quarterback. And he's got a bright future ahead of him. And he showed why he is potentially the number one overall pick in the draft. I
Yeah,
mean,
there's a
5
catch right
passing
there.
touchdowns to
Yeah.
5 different receivers. Like, I really hope Alabama fans enjoyed this guy because he wasn't just special, he was historically special. And,
Yeah.
it was so interesting just going into this entire season, right? Like the narrative was, why should Bryce Young play in this game? Why should Will Anderson play in this game? Why should any juniors with first round potential play in a bowl game that's meaningless, right? And the news that Bryce Young and Will Anderson would opt into this Sugar Bowl, it was an early Christmas present for Alabama fans, certainly, and obviously the team and Nick Saban. But you heard what Saban told those guys, right? Like, both of these guys are likely top 5 NFL first round picks. And the rest of the team were obviously thrilled to have them for this game. But, he said that you create value by playing football, right?
Yeah.
And bowl games are a great way to up your stock. And I certainly think that NFL scouts probably like what they saw from Bryce Young today.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about that, Ben. I've heard before that scouts and coaches in the league don't care whether guys opt out or not. Like, they're really just more worried about what you can do on the field. Number one, the interviews that you do with coaches, are you going to fit into the mesh of the team? But for me, if I'm a guy that's trying to pick a top 5 pick, if I had the number 1 pick and I see Bryce Young puts this team on his back, plays in the bowl game, puts his body out there, risks potentially millions of dollars. Like, this is a dude that other players want to be around. And that tells me without a shadow of a doubt, this is a guy that I want on my roster beyond what he's capable of doing on the field.
Yeah, I think ESPN's Tom Luganville actually asked Saban about this right before the game, right? Like, what kind of message does this opt-in send not only to Alabama, but to all of college football, right? Because it could potentially set a precedent for players like Bryce Young, who, again, he was probably guaranteed, if not the number 1 pick, a top 5 pick before he suited up for this game, before he decided to do that. So it's an amazing decision that he made. And, from his perspective, he says he wanted to finish the season with his teammates. And, that's obviously a virtuous move by him and Will Anderson for that matter. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, but to Nick Saban's point, right? Like, you up your stock by playing the game. I mean, he used Tom Brady as an example, which is obviously an extreme example, but his point was, look, if you're going to opt out, you're going to get ready for the combine, right? You're not actually playing the game. Sure. You're working on all of these intangibles and things that might up your stock and get you drafted. But you look at a guy like Tom Brady, who, when he was at the combine, he was scrawny, he was slow, and he got drafted late in the draft, which is obviously the story of Tom Brady's career. But what could he do? To Nick Saban's point, he could play football. He could play quarterback. And that was true for Bryce Young as well. And people knew that going into this, and he was going to be a high pick. But, man, I mean, he may have just become the number 1 overall pick before our eyes today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Ben, I want to talk about what the future for this team and really the message that this sends for this program moving forward. Like Michael Casagrande and I talked about in the pregame show, there were plenty of these 5-star early guys that were able to come and practice with the team during the bowl. Obviously, anytime that you can be in the postseason and have those extra practice reps with guys always helps with the next year because you already have that competitive advantage over other programs. But to go and to win the game on a national level in a New Year's Six bowl game, to have the number 1 recruiting class for 2023, I mean, Alabama really seems to be checking all of the boxes this year outside of winning a national title.
Yeah, Simone, I wrote a piece a few days ago that was ranking Nick Saban's non-championship bowl wins in his career. He's had a lot of them, obviously, but when he's not playing for a national championship, it can go up or down, right? Sure. And it can set a tone for the next year. But look, if you just look back at 2022, after Alabama lost to LSU, we heard all the chatter, right? Alabama's got 2 losses. The dynasty really is dead this time. The window is finally closing on Saban's era. So what does Alabama do? They finish the year in dominant fashion. They win this season with 11. They finished this season with 11 wins. And really, like a week before the bowl game, Nick Saban goes out and signs one of the best recruiting classes of all time. So do you think the window is closing? Like, Nick Saban's 71 years old, but other than the fact that he didn't win a national championship this year, like, what signs do you see of him slowing down? Like, time's going to tell on this recruiting class. We certainly don't know what kind of coaching staff turnover might take place. We don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be. I mean, the transfer portal is obviously a wild card that can work in Alabama's favor or against them. But the one thing that you can guarantee is Alabama's going to be in contention until they're not.
Yes, no doubt about that. And listen, there's no stopping Nick Saban at this point. The guy's 71 years old, out there doing plyos, a hell of a lot better than you or I could, and probably 99% of the people in the comments right now. I mean, he looked legit in practice this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, in terms of the future, you've got Nick Saban, the best coach and probably the best recruiter in all of college football. So that's good to have on your side. But look, you also lose a lot of great players, right? Like Bryce Young and Will Anderson, Brian Branch. I mean, even Jahmyr Gibbs could be a potential late first round pick. But look at the guys that are coming back. I mean, you've got Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yeah.
I mean, Ja'Cory Brooks, Jace McClellan, Roy Dale Williams, Jaheim Otis. So, I mean, you've got blue chippers who are already on the roster, not to mention this historic recruiting class that is probably going to blend in pretty seamlessly in 2020, starting as early as 2023. So you got guys who can contribute right away. So a lot to feel good about in 2023, even with all these lingering questions.
Yeah, and a lot to feel good about for Alabama fans for the rest of the day. A big win in the Sugar Bowl, and now you just get to sit back, watch the playoffs. I mean, I know Alabama's not playing, but at least you get to enjoy what would be potentially good football, possibly. I want to get your opinion on these really quick, Flanagan. 3 o'clock kickoff between TCU and Michigan. Then, of course, to follow that on ESPN with Ohio State and Georgia. Who do you like in these games, and what do you think about the matchups?
I like Georgia. I like Georgia to win and probably to repeat as national champs ultimately. And I think I like Michigan too. I mean, they're what an 8-point favorite or so against a scrappy TCU team who obviously lost to the team that Alabama just beat like badly today. But that doesn't really mean anything. It only matters when they square up this evening and this afternoon, and we'll see what happens. I will say though that look, Georgia's very good. Obviously, they beat down Tennessee after Tennessee beat Alabama, but they struggled against Missouri. They struggled against Kentucky, and Ohio State is certainly talented enough to hang with Georgia. So we'll see what happens, but I have to assume that Georgia's going to win. I think Michigan's going to win, and I think Georgia's probably going to beat the brakes off Michigan again.
Yeah, I think that Georgia being in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, the Peach Bowl, I mean, this is like a place they've been about 20 times in the last 5 years, it feels like. So no shock there. And obviously we know what the stands will look like. Although I'm sure Ohio State fans will travel as well. So it'll be a good game. That's the night game. TCU Michigan coming up here in about 10 minutes on ESPN. Guys, enjoy the rest of your college football Saturday. And of course, your New Year's Eve. Stay safe tonight. Have a great time. And thank you so much for tuning in all year to the Alabama pre- and post-game shows here on AL.com, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. It's been a great year. We really appreciate your viewership and your time. Everyone have a great day. For Ben Flanagan, I'm Simone Eli. We will see you next year.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart